Thanks for joining us again, everybody. This particular talk is going to be on kits for courses and approaches for courses. We've got four panelists here: Dave Mauriello from Drexel University, Anie Miles from ASU, Dave Schwartz, you're from RIT, is that right, Dave? And then we have Justin from Yale. So thank you all for joining and participating. Anie submitted a fast forward video, so I'm going to start with that and hopefully not cover it up with any blocks. And then the other three panelists will do their short talks before we get into the discussion. So let me share the screen. And
we're an in-house multimedia team responsible for creating a lot of video content for online course offerings and some other stuff. We work for the Arizona State University W.P. Carey School of Business. In 2016, we adopted Penn State's One Button Studio open source code and used their setup recommendations as a guide for creating our own self-serve green screen recording space. Our goal is to provide a straightforward recording space with weekend and evening availability that was user-friendly for the most novice users while still creating high-quality content output. The space itself has some simple customizations: electronic key card access, a reflect media screen that makes key samples consistent every time, a large television for on-screen presentations, and repurposed low-tech props on wheels for easy customization, and step-by-step signage and markers to help provide recording best practices. While footage coming out of the space can be used as is with a gray background, the magic really comes from the post-production template we've created. A huge thanks to Penn State for their initial work, the ACM SIGGRAPH Education Committee for allowing us to present, and of course, ASU W.P. Carey School of Business. Learn more about the 3D virtual set magic in my other presentation, and let me know if you're creating course content.
wow, that was awesome. I hope you didn't do that in all one breath. That was really impressive. And so let's start with Dave Mauriello and his talk, and then we'll go through Dave Schwartz and Justin from there. So go ahead and take it away, Dave.
Okay. Let's see. I have just a few slides here. So apologize for the dog barking here. So what I'm calling this format, Pick Your Path Adventure course format. So the whole idea is to allow students to pick their path rather than having it all just kind of dictated to them. There could be two paths to choose from. There could be a whole many paths. It could be for a few weeks, or it could be for the entire course. To give some practical examples, I have a organic modeling course, and at the last 3 weeks of the course, they have the choice between following a sculpting path. So we start getting introduced into ZBrush and the workflow for ZBrush, or they can go into rigging. So up until that point, the first 7-8 weeks was building a human model, so they can take their human model and then learn how to rig it. An example of sort of doing it for the entire course is I have a character animation course where there's actually 3 options to how they can take the course. There's a full just character animation approach. So for the entire 10 weeks, do something similar to 11-second club, where they pick a piece of dialogue, and they find 2 character rigs and they animate the interaction. The other approach would be all rigging. So that's a little bit more customized, whether they want to spend the entire term rigging one character or split it up into 2 halves. And then there's a generalist approach, which was the way the course was run prior to me arriving at Drexel, where they built the character, rigged the character, and animated the character doing a monologue. So there's 3 options for that course. So the big question is why, right? That's going to be a lot of work, right, for the instructor, right? Well, student engagement is doing really well, and obviously it's a big in the holy grail now in academia. Everyone's talking about student engagement. But I think that there's a lot of talk about it. What could we do? Blah, blah, blah. But I think that, there's a lot of factors, outside of academia that are possibly influencing student engagement. I think there's a lot of chaos, basically for them these days. And this gives them some sense of control, it gives them more agency in their course of study. And being able to choose these different paths within the course, I think it gives them control, gives them a little bit more ownership to what they're studying. Everyone has been responding very well to it. The other aspect is that, I run into problems where I come up with what I think is a great idea for a course, but I can't quite get the numbers to fill the course. And so the admins won't allow me to run the course. A good example would be rigging. Even if we have 30, 40 students to try, I think our cutoff is 9 at Drexel. And it would be a struggle to get 9 students to sign up for a course that's all rigging. However, if I can have a few weeks of rigging in one course, or I have another course where it would be all rigging, 3 or 4 students who take that path are enough for when it comes to senior project. Our senior projects, they form teams and produce an animation, and someone's got to rig those characters. So there's a means to be able to, I get the numbers, I get the content that I need out to students, so that not just for their sake, but also for supporting senior project. All right. So basically, this works, this gets it through, this gets the course to run. And, admins are happy, students are happy, and everyone seems to be happy with this approach. I've been doing this just before COVID. I think it really, once we went remote and COVID hit, I think it really sort of took off, and they responded very well to this, and I've been continuing it ever since. And I should say that a lot of as far as class time and whatnot, I've also been doing mostly a flipped format for the course. So a lot of the content is sort of prepackaged and it's there for them. So the class sessions, if I have 2 paths, for instance, I'll just break the class session up into those 2 times. And, so it's more, they already have the content. It's just Q&A and crits and things like that. So that's really all I have for this. And I look forward to talking about this further in the Q&A.
Thanks, Dave. Excellent. All right. And so that'll bring us David Schwartz.
Yeah, hi there. It's funny. Share screen. I was going to show you my desktop to be amusing. So when we all entered the pandemic and the administrators hadn't quite used Zoom before, it was funny watching people's desktops. And a certain administrator I saw had a folder called lawsuits on the desktop. So sometimes during these presentations, I like to show my desktop where you see stuff and more stuff. Anyway, so thanks for coming to the talk. Atlas, a new open source collection of game development examples with fully commented code. So I came to game development sort of a little sideways. So I met Don at RIT and at Cornell, excuse me. And I came there as a civil engineer and interested in, teaching intro programming. They wanted somebody, it was the first boom internet, and ran out of faculty and said, all right, there's this guy publishing textbooks over at Buffalo, a civil engineer, but knows computing, let's do something. And so through about 7 years, through an awful lot of work, and Don knew me, in the end, I created a game program and ended up at RIT, and now I'm leading that. I've been in administration for 9 years. So when I came to computer graphics, I realized that I'd been so focused on game design. All right, well, I've got this mathematical background. How hard could this be? And I had not realized the degree to which teaching game development can actually go. Some schools have it in computer science departments, some put it in computing departments. It can be jumbled depending on where you are. It's not necessarily teaching computer graphics. Are you using engines? Are you doing creative coding? Is it in processing? Is it P5? Was there P5? Are we using game engines? Do you use JavaScript? Do you do Erlang? Erlang has graphics. I didn't know that. I found that out last night. We want to have the how with the why. We've got these graphics APIs. I'll say pace, that it moves slowly, but it doesn't move slowly. Is OpenGL out? In Vulkan and Metal in? Is DirectX 12 in? Should we still be teaching old things? And on top of this complexity, I need this to be interactive. It has to be real time, or as close as we can to get to real time. It's surprising, for the longest time, we barely even mentioned ray tracing in my school, and that has obviously come up. So when I meet with prospective students, so my life as an administrator, again, 9 years of this, I often tell prospective students, I call it the draw square problem. You have a square. Are we doing it artistically? Are we drafting it? Was it old ActionScript and Flash where it's like, okay, here's my square, there's some code behind it? Are we doing some intermediary abstraction layer? Are we doing it in creative coding? Or is it something that's on the right, where, I will show this to, parents who don't believe that, well, you're coming in for game design or game development, this can't be real. So, oh, really? Imagine this. And not to scare students necessarily, but then on the flip side, as students go through the curriculum, they say, well, you know what, I want to have these creative experiences. I'm not necessarily worried exactly how this polygon gets rendered or how this image gets rendered. I want to do interesting things. I still want to be programmatic. I want to be computational. I want to work with artists. Am I sitting down managing shaders? Am I sitting down managing memory? When do I draw the square? And I've realized that because I came at this from the world of civil engineering, I never confronted these issues. And so in a weird way, I'm like the student who sees this for the first time. So I'm learning graphics for the first time. And I said, all right, I find tons of examples online. How do I draw a triangle? How do I draw a cube or a square? My next step is not all the things that you see in these tutorials. My next step is, how do I draw 2 triangles? How do I draw 2 squares? Are there efficient ways to do that? Can I get them to move? Can I get them to hit each other? Where do they hit? Where do they bounce off? So I start looking through computer graphics books, said, oh yeah, there's this thing called collision detection. Here's a brief overview. That's the thing I actually need ahead of time. Well, it turns out there are a battery of tutorials. There's OpenGL. This is a screenshot. I just went to the Cronus page. So, all right, what do you think is good? How many of those are updated? Well, goodbye, OpenGL, hello, Vulkan. Which of these should I be using? I didn't even bother with the DirectX thing. So we, thought, all right, let's just pick those 2. So I've been looking through SIGGRAPH pages, and this is not a slam on the education forum. Dig through these pages. A lot of the stuff has just not been updated. And I realized that old thing, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. I thought, all right, maybe I can help out. Maybe, I don't know, a group of us. This is a pitch to the SIGGRAPH community. Look at those pages. A lot of the stuff has not been touched in years. So I know, let's take a complex problem and make it more complex. So me and a whole bunch of students for years have been trying to solve every problem in graphics that we can possibly think of. This thing called Atlas. Let's just do the whole thing. We're assuming that someone else has taught someone how to program. We're assuming art, music, audio, writing somewhere else. Let's just focus in on the graphics part of game development, the computer graphics, some of the advanced math, some of the programming, and so forth. Let's see if we can go from about sophomore level up to what I call fluid simulation. Maybe first year masters, maybe second year's masters. It's very much a work in progress. Standalone examples, try to make them self-contained if possible. Allow for redundancy. Try not to get people to install massive things with header files and changes on Visual Studio. Make sure there are plenty of comments in there. Make sure it's open source. I should put that, this is open source. Allow for, let's come up with a good quad tree. Let's come up with a good separating axis theorem. Let's come up with a few good ray tracing examples. Yes, it means we're solving other people's homework, but I think we're at the point where students are going to just look up Stack Overflow or open.gl or wherever. They're going to find this code anyway. So let's just do things. And then if someone's done better than we can, link to it. There's no ego loss here. I knew how to be a quick talk, so I just want to give a few pictures of some of the examples that are out there. We have a 3D SAT. We've got RK4 integrators. There are about 700 examples. It's massive. It is a crazy Google Doc that's out there. We've got pages and pages and pages. of insanity. We tried to solve every homework problem we could possibly think of across 5 years of a curriculum. I'm at the point I need help. I want to just give this to the community. I want to help vet it. I want to update it. I want to figure out better ways. I want to solve the things that we didn't solve. You name it. So that's my big pitch. It's been a multi-year process, project, and so forth. It's out there, bit.ly program games. It gets you to this sort of nutty document, and there you go. And I figure we can sort of hit this during the QA session. Try to keep it within 5 minutes. Thanks all.
Thanks, David. That's awesome. And feel free to pop that link into the chat comments so that folks can get that link. And that brings us to Justin Berry from Yale.
I think what you're doing, Dave, is really interesting and pretty important. And I can back up that statement by showing something a little similar, but a little bit different. I am notoriously long-winded, so I'm going to try and cut to the chase. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So what I want to talk about real quickly is a kind of toolkit that we created called the Verb Collective. I'm going to kind of briefly introduce it. As I do, I just want to sort of show you where you can find it. If you go to the, the Unity Asset Store, it's available now as a free asset. So you can just download this whenever you want. Everything's open source. I'm not going to, though I can later, show a little bit of some of these links in terms of like there's a playable demo. There's also a really nice, convenient, here, I'll actually just open this up because it's pretty useful to just give a sense to go back to in a little bit. But it's a publicly available resource. And the idea behind it was when I think about teaching people to make experiences, I'm a lot less interested in teaching them to code. And I'm not necessarily interested in teaching them how to, in other words, my particular background in the arts is I'm not trying to teach someone how to use the tool. I'm trying to teach them why the tool can be powerful, important, and useful, and trying to get them as quickly as possible to the point where they're making meaningful experiences. And the feeling is that once they're making meaningful experiences, they'll very soon begin taking a deeper dive into these tools and be willing to kind of go that route. So what the Verb Collective essentially is it's a collection of short scripts that are designed to make common interactions quickly available through Unity's normal interface. In other words, there's no specialized interface with it. And I'm just going to show you, I'm going to make something really, really quickly. Well, here I already started this. Let me get rid of the scripts that I put on here. I was just making sure. So right now, this is just a plain sphere and a plain cube. I will say for expediency, I added a rigid body to this, which is important for some of the scripts I'm going to use. In here, there's a folder called triggers. If I open that up, you'll see there's all these different sort of basic trigger responses like when touched, when still, has landed. And each one of these acts as a possible trigger. I'm going to make when touched active. And essentially, whenever this object is touched, what will happen is anything that is in this sort of array is going to run, any one of the other verbs. So if I go into my verbs folder and I just drag, to grow, oh, I didn't mean to open that up, but there's the code. Where is my Unity? If I drag to grow onto my cube and I drag to grow into that triggered verb field, now if I just hit, this is the sharing screen thing is blocking my play button. If I just click play, I can just drag this and there it grows. Not that exciting, but the thing that is exciting about this is, hold on, let me get play mode out of play mode, is that you can combine these verbs in lots and lots of different ways. You can create looping verbs, you can make them trigger themselves to create kind of like internal loops or logics. Any one trigger can trigger many, many verbs, and actually all of the verbs can trigger other verbs, not just the trigger verb. So for instance, I'm going to try and be really quick here. I do apologize. I'm kind of trying to show a lot really quickly, but if I go to movement, I'm just going to grab to rotate, and I'm going to put it on this cube. And you can see I can drag to rotate into to grow. And now when I hit play, that second to start up here. Oh, sorry, it is running now. It's going to grow, and it should, when it's done growing, it should rotate. Thank God. Okay, it worked. So the point is that all of these things, and I know I'm a little bit over time, so I'm going to try and be quick. I'm just going to get out of play mode, and I just want to show a couple key things about the verbs themselves. The first thing is I wanted code to not be intimidating to new students. I was thinking about the wall of text that Dave showed, and I call that the wall of terror. I think about new students that want to get engaged with the medium, but they see that wall of code and they just totally freak out. So every verb in the Verb Collective is headed with like a silly little poem. Here's one from To Return. Home is where the heart is, and as far as you go, you can always go home. This verb brings you back to where you began. You know, they're kind of like these silly little things. But the idea is that they're a little bit ridiculous, and I want them to know that even slightly ridiculous people can write code, and I want them to just feel that in their bones. And very quickly to click on that cube just to show what the verbs actually look like. There's a field for notes to self. I could say this makes this grow. So in other words, I can comment directly in the inspector for people if I'm collaborating. I can turn things on by making them active or not. And all of the different fields are commented. So, you know, select how much you want the object to grow, a value between 1 and 0, such as 0.5 will shrink it instead, right? They're sort of attempted to be commented. And the idea is that when I think about most students doing a project, most of the time they hit Google and then they just like find some random piece of code online and try and make it work. The idea is that it's like creating a simple, succinct set of scripts that have all of those basic functions, like making something grow, making something move, you know, how do you trigger something, and putting them all in one package that's well commented so that students can just quickly find those things and they can have agency from that process. So that's my sort of lightning. I only went like 2 minutes over. That's like a first for me, so I feel very proud. I'll stop my share. And I can post links to all of that in the chat in just a moment.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, everybody. You know, some of the things that we've been hearing about today, I know Don was sharing about Moore's Law, and we've had a couple times where administration has come up, and it seems like there's a bit of a Moore's Law of administration just expecting us to teach more and more content as the years go by, and rightfully the students are expecting more. You know, I back when I was in college, I learned Excel for the first time, and now that's shown to our kids when they're in elementary school, and so they come to us with a certain amount of native awareness, and these kits become pivotal to being able to get over that initial intimidation. It seems like all of you had an element of like trying to get over that hurdle, whether it's Dave being able to make it a possibility for the students to have their own agency in selecting the specialization that they're digging into in the class, Anie making it possible for faculty to get over the intimidation of having to be, you know, set up an entire camera broadcasting system. Dave, you know, both you and Justin are kind of remind me, when I was learning coding for the first time, there was this big, huge yellow book called Numerical Recipes. And, you know, that was it. There was no internet. Like you'd have to have this massive book if you wanted to learn how to do it. There it is. Oh, yours, you have a newer copy than I do. And my copy's in the office.
I broke down because the free version's out there, and I've been telling students in games, you realize there's a whole chapter here on random numbers, numerical accuracy, In fact, it's like part of me wonders is like in the world of games and graphics and whatnot, have we forgotten numerical methods? Sorry, interrupted. Keep going.
No, this is great. I mean, it's all about the conversation here. So I'm, curious about like, what was the frontmost thing that you were thinking of? What was that initial problem that you were seeing that really needed to be addressed? And how are you seeing that problem addressed with these solutions in your classes? And let's go reverse order this time. We'll start with Justin and work our way back to Mauriello.
I mean, to me, the biggest problem is, I mean, this is good. I've tried to say this, but I think the biggest problem is diversity. I mean, I think that you have a lot of students that have a lot to offer or a lot to bring to the conversation. But one of the problems is that coding is intimidating. Making things from scratch feels off-putting to a lot of people. And I think that because of where I'm situated at Yale and kind of my role in the center is, I'm constantly trying to bring people to the table that don't feel like they belong at the table. And what I mean by that is not necessarily just, gender or race. I mean diversity in all of its forms, right? Like what happens when you bring a gardener to the act of programming a game? Again, that might sound kind of trite, but actually they bring a sense of clarity in their observations that can be really powerful. Sometimes something that we take for granted when we're in the industry, and I'll give a short example. When I first started doing this, I was working with a group of artists from the School of Art. One of them was a self-confessed Luddite, hated technology. We went on this research trip to Hewlett-Packard's office in Palo Alto, and we were meeting with the research team. Everybody's going around a table saying, what's VR? And of course, VR is the future of education. VR is the future of this. VR is the future of gaming. And when it got to that student, Val, she said, I'll tell you what VR is. It's an inherently violent act. You stick some device on your face and you blindfold yourself to every experience except for something that some person, programmed for you. And it was just like everybody in the room, their jaw dropped. And then they were kind of like, it's kind of true, right? That makes sense. I hope I didn't already tell that story at Maverick years ago, Nick, but it's a meaningful one to me. And I think that the last time I talked with Val, who, when I first met her, laughed at the concept of coding, the last thing she said to me was, oh, I just had the best time. I attended this data science and machine learning boot camp at MIT. It was really cool. I never would have thought that I would have heard those words. And the point is that people who have a lot to offer the community don't always feel like they know how to get into it. And so I think one of the things that's important for me is not just making tools that are effective, but if you can, making tools that are engaging and easy for people to feel like they are able to access them. I don't know if that makes too much sense, or it might be too much to pack into like a 2-minute response, but
that sounds great.
That's my sense of the biggest problem.
Dr. Schwartz?
Yeah, I was writing down some notes. In some ways, I wish I had another talk. So, right in the middle of this, I thought, hey, I wonder if anything news out there. So on YouTube is this guy who says, hey, here's how to do multiple objects in OpenGL. Who is this person? I'm not saying, it's like, where is peer review? My code, it's me, a whole bunch of students doing this stuff. Is it vetted? Is it valid? It's so much stuff. There could be so many errors in there. So how do we do peer review? Then the other thing too, I feel like that we bring students in with games, robots, VR from, in my world, we'll say STEM, but it really should be STEAM. But then you hit sophomore year and all of a sudden, sucker, bait and switch. You crack open OpenGL or any one of these tools, it's overwhelming. And it feels to me like it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It's like, we could make this easier to do. It shouldn't have to be, well, when I was in school, I had to go through thousands of lines of code. You have to do this too. Why don't we make this a little easier to understand? And I feel easier to find. I feel like we're recreating the wheel and it's just endless. And then, so our students are hitting Google. I don't know what they're looking at. I don't know if those things are valid. And, I don't want to go find some author's book and rip off their entire code base and just give it for free. I mean, they wrote the book, we should, but it ties in academia. How much credit do you get for writing a textbook? No, you got to keep publishing. So who's writing these books and getting them updated? And it's just infuriating. And I feel sorry for a generation of students that it's very difficult to do these things. So the temptation then becomes, you know what? I'm not good at it. I'm not going to be an engine programmer. I'm not going to be a graphics programmer. I want the tool to make it easier. So in some ways it's become too easy. I don't know what Unity physics is really doing. I don't know what Unreal's, so we're losing this. And I think it's a shame. So, I'm not sure if my solution helps, but I just want it's like a short sort of shot across the bow. I don't think we're doing this right. And I want to be out there as part of this to see if we can do this better. I keep thinking there has got to be an NSF proposal out there to say, it's not just attracting students to college. You have to keep supporting them sophomore year, junior year, senior, and beyond. So, I can keep going this. I feel very passionate about it. I want to make sure others get time.
Well, as a follow-up, as a follow-up question to that, we had a question in the Q&A from Vobakona, who actually administers the website for this education committee. And he was curious as to why not use a wiki? And does the aspect of peer-reviewed factor into that decision process, or with being able to be maintained by a community but still searchable? I'm not sure if that plays into this.
I would love a wiki. In fact, I have done some searches on this at SIGC. How many graphics talks are there? It's interesting. It's like, oh, there is an opportunity for scholarship, because I know from my side, it's just, I don't even know where to publish this stuff half the time. And, it's just, I got to get myself organized. An administrative life and an academic life, very difficult to balance. I think Sean Foster, who's here, does a better job at it than I do. Props to Sean. But yeah, if there's some way of, rotating committees, groups that could actually download some of these examples, test them out in the classes to say, hey, students, here's a few quadries we've identified. Let's inspect them. So rather than trying to recreate them, let's debug what's out there. And I think that's just as valuable for a student, learn by example. And if they do find mistakes and other tweaks, let's post it to the greater community so that you do get peer review, it gets dissemination, and there is a sense of impact for those that actually take the time and effort to contribute to this. That is measurable in terms of the scholarly output. I just want to reinvigorate that community. So at that resource site or some other site. I'm not sure if that fully answered the question.
No, that's great. Yeah. And so that brings us to Anie, and your solution is actually interesting because it actually targets teachers. And it seems that, as professors and instructors, we have the same encounters with being intimidated by new things from time to time. And it seems like your solution is set up in that regard.
Definitely. I think that's one of our approaches. So I'm in a slightly different situation, as my full-time job is actually a multimedia developer and producer. So I create a lot of this stuff for business school faculty. And I think that makes it that Luddite is very much prevalent. There's like this, avoidance of technology. And we have a lot of people that don't even know basics for screen recording, and Zoom was a challenge. And so we had to create kind of this path of least resistance for getting people to produce content in a way that was quality and engaging. And that was one of the big things, is we noticed this need for connecting with the students and making it in a way that was accessible for them. So I think that helped our faculty provide that connection to students.
That's great. And Dave, what were you seeing before you started this, from a student perspective in particular, that was going on in your classes with, the different topics, and then giving them this option of choose their own path?
Sure. Well, I should say that, I'll fully admit that a lot of the motivation was selfish. I don't think any of us enjoys having to try and teach people against their will, right? So having subjects in a course that you can tell right away, oh, I don't want to do this, right? So that was part of it right off the bat. All right, well, what if, what if I gave them options, and I think that's where it began. And then also kind of following the selfish line, there were things that I wanted to teach, that I wanted to have fun sharing some new things that I was playing with and getting students active in it. But like, I just could not. It just couldn't either I couldn't get the numbers for a course, or I was kind of stuck, like my curriculum, my load was locked in, and I could not like get another course in. So it's like, all right, well, how can I work this in to so some of the pre-existing courses? So initially it was selfish, but I think the students have been responding to it, and and I would love to get to the numbers where I could have like, a dedicated course on some of these topics, but until that day arrives, this works either on a small scale with like just a couple of weeks, it varies, or for the entire course, where I've got basically it's 3 courses in one for one of my courses. So that's where it came from. And I think that, like I said, the feedback is positive. And otherwise, the other thing too is otherwise some of this content wouldn't get to students, and they need it. I mentioned the senior project. I mean, we need riggers for senior project, but there's other topics that, have to come up, or some topics to be able to go a little bit deeper. That's the other thing too, is sometimes, we will just can kind of scratch the surface of some things. And I guess coming back to the selfish idea, I would get student requests like, well, for an independent study, it's like, well, how about we just do this in class, and so that's kind of another reason why I've been doing this, and I'm figuring out different ways to kind of make this happen in all of my courses.
I wonder, it also, there's this opportunity where students that come into the course choosing path A are almost osmosis, or just kind of fly on the wall, like what's going on over there in path B. Like, have you seen any students where they come through, they choose path A, but they kind of saw what was going over there, path B, what, that actually looks really cool, and then want to come back around and end up getting interested in something that they thought they weren't interested in?
Yeah, that has happened. I've had it's always a pleasure with because everyone always like, oh, rigging, and I'm not going to say like, I'm a rigger, but when it seems like, it seems kind of interesting, I want to try this, and then like suddenly they discover like they're good at it and they enjoy it. So I have had some students sort of switch from one thing to another. I've had a few really bold ones try and like, well, I want to do both, and actually went through like both paths. So that's occurred as well.
Yeah. And then for Anie, Dave, and Justin, a lot of what you're doing really seems like I've heard this described as dessert first, right? So here you go, you get to start working with, in Annie's case, people get to be working with this, multimedia graphics and presenting far more polished videos than simply sitting at home and having a bookcase behind them or a window or something like that. And with David and Justin, you're kind of like leapfrogging over that hurdle of, okay, well, this is how you declare a variable, and this is how you make a header for a function, and getting folks involved. So I'm wondering, have you seen then that you have to do something else then to encourage folks to dig in deeper? In Annie's case, like maybe someone uses the system and is like, could you also add like a capture, a spherical from this auditorium or this courtyard, or, it would be really cool if we could have this thing, this science project, this engineering lab set up, for example, and have that in that space virtually, as opposed to, just having to point to diagrams. And then of course, for David and Justin, the idea that, okay, the students get involved in this, they're pulling from the toolkit or the library or the verb set? Like, is there something that you do to maybe hopefully prompt them to start like in creating their own verbs or starting to create their own content or digging a little bit more under the hood? So I'll go randomly here. I'll go with David Schwartz and then Anie and Justin.
See, if I get this right, maybe it's like I was trying to hammer this in chat. I was like, I'm getting very, I hit a whole bunch of caffeine. There's this thing in computer science. At what point you teach students how to create linked lists, like, connect this to this and this, add a node, remove a node, and so forth. But we know they're going to hit Google. So why not give them a really good linked list and then do something with it? They still need to know how and why it works. So can we give them enough? Here's, ways to do, spatial partitioning. Here's a way to create an object, multiple objects, different ways to animate. They're standalone examples. Now it's up to you to build something. I want an example where you see X number of objects, different kinds of user interaction, a certain length of experience. So in my case, it's go make games, but it doesn't have to be games. So this way, we know they may still do random internet searches, but we know that they're looking at what we think are vetted examples. They can learn by example. These code bases are ginormous. And then theoretically, I mean, I'm doing stuff that's not multidisciplinary when their students are just learning graphics. I guess the short version is, can they build interesting experiences that are customizable based off of the doodads, the chunks that we give them? The advantage is, so I helped create a career preparation, a co-op preparation class. RIT is a co-op school, because on the resume, we tell students, don't list your homework assignments because everyone's doing the same homework. But if you could list your class project that you came up with, it's unique. So this way, it helps them it shows work outside the class, even though it was in the class.
Sure. Now you've brought up the going to Google. They're going to go to Google and they're going to search for it. And, it's difficult necessarily to ascertain what are they going to land on and how valuable it would be. It kind of alludes to the idea that, the library, the atlas that you've created is something like, here's a bucket of fish, but maybe teaching them how to use Google and how to ascertain the value, or which, are there certain sites that are more valuable in certain contexts, or even the appropriate vocabulary. A lot of students who are brand new to programming are not going to know what a truncate is or what a modulus is, and kind of bringing up their vocabulary so that make them more effective to do that Google searching on their own. Have you encountered any of that? Is that anything that's built into what you're doing?
Yeah, one of the things is I kind of broke off from intro programming thinking SIGC is such a massive community. It's just, I'm going to just leave that aside. So one of the struggles I've had with this too, and it's not necessarily SIGGRAPH problem. If I had a longer talk, I went on to Amazon a couple nights ago, just like, all right, where are we in terms of computer graphics books, intro to computer graphics, fundamentals of computer graphics, and then just different variations. And they're just not getting updated. And one of them, it's like, oh, hey, we're using WPF. I just talked to Activision Blizzard yesterday. They said they're looking for tools programmers that use WPF. I'm like, wait, that's still alive? It's like, so in terms of the API, so just getting our students, like if I start talking about pointers, they don't know what that is. They're not, it's just that sort of these lower level concepts. We're teaching Java, Python, C# for the most part, maybe JavaScript all over the place. And so the C and C++, all the lower level things that we need, there's like, at RIT, we actually do have a bridge class. Before you even touch graphics, we go through a managed memory, programming course, because you can't teach a C++ course. We can't be a trade school, but yes, it's C++. And so I find then they're okay, but turns out there's a bunch of terminology, a bunch of sort of maturity that they're just not used to. I've wondered, is it so sophisticated mathematically, computationally, that are we pretending that we're doing a good job teaching it sophomore, junior year, maybe senior year? But it's like something you said earlier, how like Excel, everything just keeps pushing down. So I don't know, maybe there's something to be said for it. That's why I'm so fascinated by what I call the draw square problem. And maybe we should be talking to our art colleagues and saying, maybe let's start with the visuals and work our way down as opposed to trying to build everything from the bottom up, because it's so, like when Don was talking earlier, GPU, those have connections into computer science departments or computer engineering departments. How many of those comp or computer organization courses talk about the GPU? And it's like, do we need a second computer organization course? And I don't have good answers here.
Explode heads. Yeah, that's great. No, thank you. Thank you very much. And so Anie, with your project, I almost feel like you're kind of like the campus computer graphics dealer, and you've set up this little station on the corner and you're like, come on in, try it. It'll make you feel good. And do you have folks that come in, they try this system for the first time, and then, that was really good, but can we add a little more? And so do you end up like starting to build out more based on specific requests, or is, everyone just kind of happy with as it is right now?
I feel like you have already answered this question more perfectly than I could, because that's kind of exactly what happens is we get people coming in and they're like, it'd be great if we could try this thing, or like, I'd really like to be able to XYZ. And so then we integrate, a Cintiq or a smart podium, and people can, we have multiple inputs on virtual screens and things like that. So yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's the way we've ended up developing this even more over the last few years, is people coming to us with requests, and kind of like in a reverse way, exactly what David's describing is like, they don't know what they don't know. And so we can provide them with these tools, and then from that, they explore further. So it's like a lot of our faculty and instructors end up being kind of in the student role in this position. So I want to like make sure we have enough time for all the amazing questions that are coming in chat. So I'll keep it to that.
All right. Yeah. Let me know if you see something directed to you, because I definitely wanted to get back to Justin. And, I thought there was something really unique about your project in that you were embedding poems into the comment code. And, I can recall back to like, you can find on the internet the original source code of the Apollo programming computer, and there's little Easter eggs of have a nice day, things like that are in there. And I'm wondering, like, is that intentional as a way of kind of enticing folks to start like, I have to open the code because I just want to see what the Easter eggs are in there, and is that something that then gets them interested in the code itself? Or
yeah, so the first time that the original reason that I wanted to have these little poems was I had this idea where I wanted, when you just clicked on this is for Unity, and I wanted to think about what's the experience of someone using it. So when you click on the script in your inspector, usually that window is really narrow, right? Your little inspector window for your code. And I wanted there to be almost like a little haiku that just told you what it did. But the other side of that is, I think you nailed it on the head, right? It's like, I want people to feel comfortable actually reading the code and getting a sense that there are things in the code that are readable, like the comments exist and that you can use them and read them and learn from them. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay real quick, just because I wanted to sort of follow up on something you mentioned about like, what happens if someone wants to then make their own verb. So actually the system is sort of built with that in mind. And there's kind of like different tiers of users where you start like, just like throwing things together. And then you get to this point where you say, well, this is nice, but I just can't do the one thing that I want. I have to maybe make my own verb, right? And then the third tier of user is someone who's saying, I'm not really using this collective as like a full system because it's not really great for that. It's not particularly efficient. But I might want to be using it for little pieces, little things that are useful, or for grabbing the code snippets instead of going to Google for it. So just to show, there's one of the verbs is called to example, and to read the poem, I am nothing, you are nothing, we know nothing, nothing can be known. However, it can still be helpful to know why these scripts look the way they do. So it basically is an over-commented empty version of a verb from the Verb Collective that just explains each part and how you can add functions to it, what it looks like when you do. It gives sort of some strategies that you can use. Once you've got to the point where you just know what you're doing and you just want to make some scripts, there's another verb that's called to sample, and there's really just nothing in it, right? It's essentially like, just a bracket with the basic function set up, and you can just drop in your snippets of code to make it work. So the idea is that I think you said it very succinctly, which is you want people to come in the door and recognize that there's something worth staying for. And once they do, they're going to learn this stuff. You know, I mean, it's like, it's not always about, I don't know how to say it. I want people to feel empowered and feel like they have agency as soon as possible in the course, because I feel like that agency and that empowerment will dictate their behavior for a pretty long time. And that's when you have people that when they're not in your class, they're still practicing and learning and doing it, even if they don't have, you know, a project to turn in, because they've felt a sense of empowerment or agency from it. And I think that, I don't know that the Verb Collective does it perfectly. I mean, it's sort of probably more ambitious than it is effective, although I'm trying to improve it all the time. But I think that that's the goal, is exactly what you said, right?
So do students that create their own verbs and include a haiku in the comments, do they get a higher grade?
Absolutely, yeah. They get the A++, which is similar to C++, but not as sharp.
But with a better GPA. Got it.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much. I mean, we've really blown through the time. This has been a fantastic conversation. One of the hopes for SOIREE in general was that people would be wanting for more, as opposed to, you know, wondering how much longer is this going to go on. And I think this, you know, this panel absolutely delivered on that. So I really thank you for participating and sharing all of your work here. I'll encourage everyone who's, you know, attending here to definitely take a look at the chat. There was actually some parallel conversations going on, and those are really, really great. And also Annie posted her direct email, so that if you'd like to, you know, get a copy of that video, or maybe even a slower and more easily digestible version, she might have one of those to share with you. So definitely take a look at the chat and get that information. But with that, we'll wrap up this session, and we'll have a few minutes before the hour starts, in which point we're going to be looking at some education examples and experiences. So I will wrap this session up for now, and we'll see you in just under 10 minutes for our next session. Thank you all again. See you soon.